Hello. I was all on mute and shit. Hello, welcome. I just need to make sure it is recording. Okay, we are recording. Okay, cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome in your own time. We are getting into the monthly read, and then we were going to do the cards and channeling group for my Patreon. Hello, YouTube. If you're not a member of my Patreon, you can be a member for as little as $1. There's only 3 tiers: $1, $5, $10. Of course, you can give more if you'd like to. I'm like checking on where all my stuff is. I need some lip gloss, so you're gonna have to forgive me as I go out of frame. So we are going to talk about what June bringeth, and I wonder if you can see when I'm not sitting down. You can't see nothing. And we're going to see who wants to bring us the message for June. 6 months in, we're at the halfway point. We're doing it. We're chugging along, whether we like it or not. And we are becoming more of who we are and discovering whether who that is who we thought it was. And if that's to our liking or not to our liking. So discoveries abound. Let's see who's coming forth for the monthly read. Any of you? Any of you? Not you, but you. Okay. Okay. Anybody else from this? Okay. So we have one deck, the Tarot of Gemstones and Crystals. If you've been here before, you know this one. And I thought so. Our key card is coming from my new Oracle deck, the Mary Magdalene Oracle. Okay. And not only that, this Mary Magdalene Oracle is created by a Harvard-trained feminist theologian named Megan Watterson, who takes us to the Gospel of Mary when we shuffle through this. So, them Dead Sea Scrolls, okay. Them things the Vatican wants locked up tight. That's what we're going to talk about for the key card. But if you're on Patreon, you're going to get that. If you are a doing the most subscriber, and on YouTube, you're not going to get that, but you are going to get these first 3 cards, which are as valuable as valid. So, June, what can you tell us about yourself? What do we need to know? Mad cards came out, so give me a second while I put mad cards back in their places. Now, this is interesting because these cards kind of came out like a crew. Usually a little individual card shootout, but these ones were back to back in the stack, and I've been shuffling this deck for ages. So let us see what the concern card is for June 2024 and make sure everything's in its right place. Okay. All right. Card number 1. I know that's right. 6 of Swords, which we have Larimar here. Stone that only develops, is only tumbled and made, I believe, in the Dominican Republic. It's a result of submerged volcanic activity. That's why it's blue. Because I guess something happens to the lava at that depth or whatever. But with that being the 6 of Swords, okay, so the Wayfarer taking us between worlds. And in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like June is an opportunity for a reset, like a reorientation, a recoordination. Like maybe you sort of forgot what you needed to do, and now you're being reminded of what that is, and you're having the opportunity to return to that. And it might not even be a forgot what you needed to do. Maybe you've been meaning to do something for some time, and it's been it's swords, right? So it's been in the thought process, the intellectual, the theoretical, the hypothetical aspect of your reality. And now you're about to ground that into the field appropriately with spring turning to summer and us coming into these more active, especially personally proactive signs, right? Like Gemini, Cancer, and Leo are all people who attend to their personal needs. Okay. Might not attend to your. Am I still muted? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Give me a thumbs up or something. Um, oh, hopefully you can hear me anyway. I think my otter was talking. Okay, okay. Yes, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, someone called me. So if they call again, I will mute for a second. But anyways, so moving something from the thought space to the action space is definitely right for June. And that could be personally, that could be sociodynamically, you know, like whether that means in your home, in your friend group, in your community, at your work. But I do see something moving from hypothesis to the field here with the Six of Swords, and also sort of the ability to show up fresh. The first thing that actually came to me was the ability to prove yourself, but obviously I'm not going to advocate for you proving yourself for shit. Like all you do is show up in the way that you most prefer to show up and in the ways you most need to show up. And ideally those align to hold you down, regardless of what anybody else thinks. Okay. So when I see this as the concern, I think it's like, you know, who are you now? Who are you to yourself? Who do you most prefer to be? Who are you going to go forward being? What principles do you believe in that you are going to embody? Right? Because it is swords. Like it's still about ethics and morals and thoughts and what the ego imagines should be being done versus what is seems to be happening. Um, but it's also about, you know, walking your talk, because the more that you are aligned with what you believe you need to be doing in your heart of hearts, like truly, not just what you intellectually think, but what you truly believe you need to be doing, the more that you're aligned in that regard, the less your mind has to say. So it goes hand in hand, walking the talk, because in swords, the mind is quiet when it needs to pay attention, and it pays attention when it's doing something that it's been wanting to do anyway. Right. So this definitely still feels like, you know, following your passion when you can, as often as you can, whenever you can, working with what you have, being grateful for what is there, um, knowing that along an infinite spectrum, there's always further down points and further up points that you can be inhabiting, and using that as your personal compass, barometer, um, preference orienter. Okay. Now let's see what our opportunity obstacle is. I don't know why I'm turning them over one at a time. Of course it is. Of course it is. Going to give you a moment, viewer, to decide what you think it is. Going to give you 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's justice. Which in this deck is tourmalated quartz, as you can kind of see. I don't know why my camera does me like that, where it won't like show you clear. But anyways, justice, tourmalated quartz. Okay, so obviously, you know, it's the opportunity or it's the obstacle, and ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Um, the funny thing is, I was just thinking this before I jumped on here. Like, there's a thin line between a self-fulfilling prophecy and an inevitability. Um, Especially because a self-fulfilling prophecy, at least in a nihilistic supremacy ideationist world, tends to be something that is um, along the lines of the narrative of like a nightmare or a dream we don't prefer, or like an unpreferred outcome, right? Obviously, when we have a positive self-fulfilling prophecy, we tend to call that like fate, or like, but you know, fatalistic things can also be negative. Maybe when we call it a positive self-fulfilling prophecy, we call it like a dream, right? But with justice, Um, One, I always like to remind people that for me, in my school of thought, especially about the major arcana, even though justice is a scales and scales are thought about on a linear context, right? Like a linear plane from which the scales can be balanced. I used to tell people, think of it more like a dreidel, although that's controversial now for whatever reasons, but like think of it more like a dreidel, something that needs to find its proper balance to acquire its center, but that does not require like a flat surface in order to give you like a proper reading. And in fact, now when I'm thinking about it beyond any earthly object is, in fact, I think of justice as like a tesseract because you are entering into one plane of understanding, and based on the circumstances, you have to sort of move rooms, move phases, move realities till you are aligned to one that makes the most sense for you. And that's why I started with self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because there's a difference between thinking humanity will never get it together because there's a lot of evidence of that happening, and you needing that to be the case to justify justify or to what's the word, validate whatever it is you're telling yourself that you can or can't do, right? Because at the point that you're telling yourself, because it is just this way, I have to be like this, when I have to be like this is not actually qualified by how you would most prefer to be, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay. That's a fatalistic ending. So I think with justice here as the Six of Swords, it's like you can reframe your existence from any perspective that you feel is most valid. Existence is going to support you. It's not going to force you to think anything else. Other people, as existence, might try and force you to think other things, but nothing can internally decide for you how it is that you think or feel that you don't co-sign. So when I see justice here, it's like, you know, reframe your purpose, your passion, your objective, your existence, your reality, the universe that you consider yourself to be a part of in the narrative that is most supportive to the outcome that you prefer to be in, to the world that you prefer to live in, as opposed to condemning your outlook to what you think you see. Because that's the thing with human beings. Like, we're like, the optics that we imagine, what we imagine we can understand from what we are seeing with our eyes or hearing with our ears, it's not giving what it needs to give. But it's also because you're never really listening one with anyone. You're never using one sense. Okay. And then some people would say you're not using senses so much as you're using your brain, right? Because it's your brain that allows the synapses to function, that gives you the opportunity to have the sensory experience. Obviously, you need a body to have a brain. So, it's like the body that you feel with. So there's a lot to be said about, you know, perception and about what you are actually perceiving with, and actually what is what you are relying upon to comprehend the circumstances. You may be focusing on your eyes, and it really might be something that you're feeling in your skin, right? You might be focusing on your ears, and it might be something that you see with your eyes. So it's important to not put any one of your senses on a pedestal. It's important to have a multidimensional perspective on your circumstances because you're multidimensional. And it's also super important to recognize that, like, things are not supposed to happen in a linear order, in an existential as an existential truth, simply because humanity has decided to organize our concept of space and time in a linear fashion. Existentially, everything is happening at once. So you need to be able to adapt to having a multidimensional perspective, because that's what's actually happening. It doesn't matter that humanity has fixated on a hierarchical linear narrative. If that's not the reality, you have to trust that the everything that is evidence beyond humanity is as valid as what humanity is attempting to prove to you through the optics, which is to say that, don't believe people who tell you that they are incapable of becoming more of the versions of themselves that they prefer to be. And don't believe people who tell you that they can't show up in the world in the way that they claim the world should be, because they're they're in a state of denial, which means that it's a complete system, right? People who are in denial are also in denial about being in denial. Like the denial is doing its job, it's getting the job done. So until someone is ready to perceive reality beyond what they have been imposing on it, which has probably been imposed on them, they're not going to be able to retain the memory of that greater reality until they are consenting on an internal level, right? I wrote this in my phone and I can't even look at it now, but it was like, a self-imposed boundary is the strongest kind. Okay, because you are going to keep yourself from doing whatever you choose to keep yourself from doing. So your self-imposed boundary is the strongest kind that you have. We're not talking about when someone absolutely violates your will, okay? We're talking about all the other times that you are responsible for yourself and someone else is not physically forcing you to do something other than yourself, because obviously you're the one who's in self-imposing the will. So, opportunity obstacle card. What about our character is helping or hurting the situation? And by the way, I don't want to call whether justice is an opportunity or an obstacle. I want people to use it to show up in the world in the way that they claim it should be changed and to be the versions of themselves that they most prefer to be to the best of their ability without judging how much, how, like, when, how often. It's just do it every time you remember to do it. And eventually that muscle will be strong, as opposed to saying, because it can't be all the time at my convenience, I just won't do it ever. Like, okay, well, then you're going to be left in the old land of the Six of Swords. You're not making it to the next place, because in the next thing, that's another thing about the Six of Swords. Like, the Wayfarer is taking you between worlds. The worlds that you arrive at, they don't know you. They don't know your reputation. They don't know what you're capable of. You haven't been in that landscape or that environment to determine your capability. So why would you show up and continue a narrative that you claim you don't want to identify with when you have the option of showing up as somebody else, a different version of yourself, not some fucking the talented Mr. Ripley kind of shit, but like that you get to show up as yourself, the version of yourself that you most prefer. Only you can do that. Because the version, and when I say that, again, YouTube specifically, because I'm sure Patreon has heard me say this ad nauseum, but like, the version of yourself that you most prefer is not the perfect self where everything is hunky-dory and convenient for that person. The version of yourself that you most prefer is who you would like to show up as, no matter what the circumstances are. So you have to figure out what the core of that is to really understand what yourself qualifies as. Okay, advantage aversion. What about our characters helping or hurting the circumstances? Then we'll move on to the key card, and then we'll move on to the individual polls. Wait, did it change? No, it's the same. Okay. And we have the hang person. There we go. Aquamarine. Not my stone, my month stone in the Western Pantheon. The hang person. Now I don't call him the hangman for Black reasons. The hang person. So, I mean, the interesting thing is whenever I see the hang person, the energy is very strong. Like, if you don't trust existence and you don't trust yourself, then there's like no going, right? Like, the hang person looks uncomfortable. They're in a position that doesn't really make sense to other people. And that seems uncomfortable or impossible or impractical or whatever. And yet for them, that's their natural, right? So for them, that's comfortable. For them, that is accessible. For them, that is operational, right? So obviously, whoever you are to the universe, to existence that included you, is operational, is already validated, is already sanctioned. Because truthfully, like, people are upset with the manifestations the symptoms of existence, but existence is the original shit starter. Existence started all this shit. And so literally, if you have a problem with me, you should take it up with existence. You can also take it up with me, depending on how much of my awareness is actually a part of that taking up. I can account for that, or you can take it up with existence, right? Because at the end of the day, if people want to address something with you, they're going to address it with you. Now, when you're in positions of great influence, let's call it. I'm not going to call it power because everyone's in their own personal power. But when you're in positions of great influence, let's say that you like run a business or a government or whatever, then you're in a position where, you know, your choice making is going to create circumstances that are further reaching than your own existence, right? It's easy to be like, when you haven't created agreements where people are dependent on you or entered into constructs where people are dependent on you, it's very easy to be like, oh, okay, well, this is what I'm doing and this is what it means and this is what it is. But obviously, if you continue to interact with people or encounter people who are making choices that are, let's say, abusive, um, there has to be something that obstructs someone who will not stop themselves. Obviously, the most sustainable form of rehabilitation is for somebody to choose it, right? Because then it's self-imposed and you don't have to regulate or helicopter or drag. But of course, there are people who are self-fulfilling their prophecy of nothing ever getting better and them not being capable of knowing better or doing better. And I'm sure there are some people who can get themselves to a place of psychoses where that seems the dominant truth, and therefore that is the dominant truth. The point is to stop people from getting there, right? And the way that I think that that's easily done, most easily done, is by validating yourself, being your authentic self, being an example of showing up and being like, look, you can be who you are and still be accepted by the universe and still find people that love you and still live a worthwhile life. You do not have to conform to the systems that obviously create so much like it's self-inflicted. I mean, it's not even self-inflicted, like internal turmoil, right? So when we're observing people who are making choices that are far reaching, you know, there are many ways that we can respond to that that can bring justice, reformation, or this other interesting third option. You know, I think the hanged person is kind of a curious card in the sense that it's like, to me, closest to the fool, because the fool is also sort of physically going about things in a way that doesn't seem practical for the systems that exist or for the world that they are supposed to believe that they exist in. But the fool is concerned with the present only, right? Like, everything I do is from the present, so I'm not going to be like wallowing over my past, and I'm not going to be wringing my hands over my future. I'm going to attend to what is. A lot of people, of course, in late stage capitalism would find that impractical because late stage capitalism is based on excess and scarcity, and those are things that you would need to plan for. But with the hang person, you're like, oh, this person's like lounging about with the nature, like checking into their own internal compass, having a conversation with existence. This seems impractical when humans are humaning. But I think that's so fascinating about that is that with these major arcana, the power is internally guided in justice and in the hang person. This is internally understood power. This is not power that can just be exacted from the outside. And it's also not a monolith, right? Each hang person is very different. Each person's version of justice is very different. So there's a quality in these cards that I think is saying, like, look, you can trust life, you can not trust life, but if you're not going to show up as yourself, it doesn't really matter whether you have a day or 700 days, because if you're going to use all 700 days to deny what you can know, then then you're going to be in stasis. You're not going to get very far. It's going to be like running in place a little bit, which obviously humanity is doing. So, I mean, what? If you want to join that party, you can join that party. But at this 6 month mark, I don't know what this key card's about to say to us, but I really feel like at this 6 month mark, there's a major like shift taking place, not even amongst humanity. Of course, that's happening, but humanity is also a symptom. Okay. Humans are a symptom. We ain't a cause. Like, we didn't create ourselves. So when you think about where existence is going, where the earth is going, where the solar system is going, where nature is going, and then you think about humanity, at the end of the day, you don't want to be distracted by humanity and not be with the shits with existence. So don't let humanity fool you just because we're insane. Um, don't be a negative fool. Be a neutral and positive fool. Or if you're going to meet a negative fool, use them neutrally and positively at the very least. Let them occupy the negative pocket to the best of your ability, because at the end of the day, you do not want to be stuck. I mean, you're not stuck, but you don't want to be convinced that you are in a dimension of Earth or on an Earth period where the majority of people are people you don't like, you don't trust, and you can't work with. You have to find your way to a more comprehensive understanding of the universe if you want to survive your experience, because everybody who thinks what I just said are people who are losing their shit. Like, don't lose your shit. Find your shit. Be your shit. As your shit. Do your shit. Okay. So by YouTube and not doing the most Patreon people